Hi everyone, I'm Heather Wen. I'm a retired nurse practitioner and the founder and practitioner at Arizona Healing Alternatives. On this channel, you'll find several videos, what I like to call aha moments. Some will be shorter and some will be longer. Well, we'll be talking about issues that impact your health. So whether you decide to use Western medicine, alternative medicine, or even a mix of both, I'm passionate about you knowing what your options are. In this three-part communication series, we're going to be going through a few little tips on communication and relationship communication specifically. Why am I doing that? Well, what I've seen in my practice is since this whole COVID thing, there's been a great deal of stress on relationships. Sometimes it's been a good thing when people are in the same, house together, but in some cases it's brought to light some very different communication styles which may not be so healthy. So we're going to separate this out into three parts. The first part is just going to be on basics of communication. Second part will expand on those basics, and the third will be about conflict resolution. Why am I doing this? Well, I just explained that reason why I'm doing it, because of all the stress that I've seen, but also because we know that stress does what? It impacts the immune system, and it's so important for our immune systems to stay really healthy. So these are just tips. You can use them, you don't have to use them. Some people use, silent treatments, things like that work for them. That's okay if it works for you, as long as, and now let's go into all of the disclaimers. And I won't fast forward this part where it's like really fast, like on the TV, where you can't hear anything I'm saying. So let's go through the disclaimers. These tips that I'm going to give you are not a replacement for any kind of counseling. So I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, and I'm also not a life coach. These particular tips come from my years of experience as a nurse and a nurse practitioner, where we were trained in a bit of psychology, and we were trained in how to help people and guide people through really difficult situations. But like I said, it doesn't replace any of those other things. So there's my disclaimer, said slowly and carefully, and there's my disclaimer. But at the same time, where does it come from? This is just from my own personal experience. This is things that I've heard, that I've researched, and basically my own personal experience. So you can try them out or not try them out, but when it comes right down to it, and this is another disclaimer, it's never an excuse for abusive behavior. Having spent a great deal of time, like I said, going through with people as far as their stress levels and things like that when it comes to domestic violence situations, it is never an excuse for abusive types of behavior. So let's get started. Stay tuned. So welcome to part 2 of what I call our communication and relationships series. So in this one, we're going to talk about some just basics as we build on the basics that we did in part 1. We're going to talk about the basics of kind of breaking down what a lot of people need. So we're going to go into how to just listen and validate and perception check a little bit further than we did. So we're going to build off the first one. So let's talk about that. Basically, when it comes down to when I see a lot of people in the office, what it comes down to really is most people just want to be heard and understood. I mean, how many times have you been in a conflict? And let's talk about conflict for just a minute. I digress. Let's talk about conflict for just a minute. When we talk about conflict, so many people don't want to get into a confrontation and don't want to get into a conflict. I get that. Confrontation, all of that stuff is hard. I think one of the worst phrases you can say to a man, and we'll go into men and women communication in part 3, but I think one of the worst things you can say is, I need to talk, right? So because like, oh my God, what does that mean, right? What we want to do is most people just want to be heard and understood, but oftentimes what happens is we're not active listening. So let's start with that. First of all, somebody just wants to be heard and understood. And that's what I find oftentimes is many times when we are wanting to avoid a conflict or wanting to avoid an argument, what ends up happening is what we fear the most we tend to create. And so, like we talked about, false evidence appearing real in some of my other videos. So when it comes right down to that, we tend to be so worried about avoiding a conflict that we stuff our emotions, we don't deal with it, we do that, and then it just comes out as a volcano somewhere else. So most people, base level, want to be heard, right? So when you are with somebody and they want to talk to you about something, what I always recommend is what therapists call active listening. Because most of us, honestly, when someone's talking to us, we're thinking about the next thing. We're thinking about, okay, wait a minute, what am I going to say next? What am I going to say next? Instead of us really listening to what the person is saying because we're all heated and ready to go, right? Well, if you just sit back and hear what someone is saying without rehearsing what you're going to say next, that would be a tip I would say to use. Just active listening, and with the person, it's even just coming up, listening to what they're saying. You hear what they say, take a pause, and you can tell the person saying, okay, I want to really hear what you're saying, so I may pause, okay? And then when you pause, then it's about validation. And oftentimes when I'm doing emotional reprogramming with someone, we work on validation. Feelings, as I talked about last time, are not right or wrong, they just are. And so somebody's feelings are very important, even if they disagree with your opinion. So that being the case, just to hear somebody out, somebody says, oh, I've just had a really, really bad day. This has just been horrible. It's been a bad day. Oftentimes someone just wants to be heard, not wanting solutions. We'll get into that in part 3. Not wanting solutions, they just want to be heard. So you can say, and you can validate that and go, you know, after hearing their day, saying, wow, I can imagine that sounds like you had a really bad day. Wow, instantly that diffuses a lot of stuff because people then go, oh my gosh, this person cares, they're actually listening. So it's validating. It doesn't have to be you agree, although it sounds like that, but you just say, wow, it sounds like you feel like you had a bad day, right? So very important with that to validate somebody with that. That will help, and that will go a long way. In addition to validating, you can say, I understand how you would feel that way. Now, remember we talked about tone and stuff last time. If somebody says something and it's about you, it's not just about a bad day, and they're coming to you, what you can do is you can validate and say that you've heard and understood. That does not mean you agree with what they're saying. It means you understand it. You can step out of your shoes and see what it must be like for the other person. So what that would look like is someone said, well, I feel like I'm just really frustrated because, you know, there's laundry all over the floor and I'm really upset by that. You can sit back and then say back to that person, wow, I can understand how you feel that way. That doesn't mean you agree. That's one of the biggest things. People are like, oh, well, then I'm admitting to this and that, and we go back to the ego. It's just like, okay, I could understand how that person feels that way. Not how you feel, but I can understand how you'd feel that way. That's validation, listening and validating. It's not right or wrong. Okay, because we go back to that as to winning an argument and conflict. So practice some of those things, just listening, active listening, validating, and then perception checking. The perception checking part can be, oh, if I hear you right, it sounds like that when I leave the clothes on the floor, that's upsetting to you. That's perception checking, you know, versus someone saying, oh, I understand, there's this and that, and going, oh, well then, this is the way I feel about this, and my clothes are fine where they are, right? So it just comes down to you listening, validating, and then perception checking. So if I hear this correctly, so if I hear you right, we go back to tone, right? If I hear you right, you're saying that this is upsetting to you. It's just a fact, right? This is upsetting. And they can say, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. They feel heard, they feel understood. So practice with those. If you need extra help, if you need extra assistance, don't hesitate to reach out when it comes to some of these communication things, whether it's emotional reprogramming with me, whether it's with a psychologist, psychiatrist. Sometimes if there's depression involved, medications may need to be involved. Other things like that that are more advanced, or life coaches, or whatever it is you need to get that extra assistance so that you can get the most out of all of the relationships in your life. So practice with those, and in the next one, we're going to talk about actual conflict resolution. So I hope you tune in for that one. If you enjoyed the series and you enjoyed what you're seeing, please feel free to hit that subscribe button. Also, if you would like to be notified when new videos come out, please hit that notification bell.